keynote speaker, the Dr. and Reverend Jide Macaulay, who is the founder and CEO of the House of Rainbow, which is an incredible organization. Really kind of strongly you go and check that out as soon as you can after the conference. Is an openly gay British Nigerian, born in London, and has been a Christian minister since 1998. He's an Anglican priest, an inspirational speaker, an author, a poet, a pastor and preacher, a HIV positive activist, and holds a degree in law, a master's degree in theology, and a postgraduate certificate in pastoral theology, and clearly makes a hobby of making the rest of us look bad because, wow. Jide focuses his ministry on inclusion and reconciliation of sexuality, spirituality, and human rights. He's a former board of trustee of Kaleidoscope Trust UK and is currently a chairperson of, I'm looking at this list, it's incredibly long, incredible stuff. INERELA Plus Europe, patron at Report Out, the vice chair at the One Voice Network, a HIV mentor at Positive East, a nominee for the British LGBTQ Award of Top 10 Outstanding Contribution to LGBT Life, the Noscars Award winner 2014, 2017 and 2018, volunteer chaplain at Mildmay HIV Hospital, and a volunteer champion Africa's Children Charity. As an ambulance goes swinging past. He's going to be talking to us today about his understanding of queer religion and talk about some of the more practical aspects that he's kind of adopted at the House of Rainbow and some of his personal experiences as a Black queer priest. So without further ado, I am extremely excited to welcome Reverend Jide Macaulay, and over to you.
Thank you so much, and good morning and good day to everybody wherever you are. And I think that the envy is mutual because I'm looking at the audience, and I think the time that I was probably your age, I'm sorry to say that, I was very much in the closet. So sometimes I wish the role was reversed. But nonetheless, I'm also not a doctor yet. So that's coming along, hopefully one day soon. And the other good news, is that I recently was appointed as chaplain at St. Peter's House in Manchester. So I'll get to work with more students and, in more academic arena as well. Thank you so much. So I'm sure, considering that my slide is up as well, I'm probably going to skip a few of the introductions because you have done me justice by introducing me very well. So let's go with the slide one at a time and I'll see how it goes. Thank you so much. Just to let you know, yeah, this is fine. Yeah. Just to let you know, this is just an overview. I may cover everything. I may have to skip some things, but I also will need somebody to help me with timekeeping. It's okay to interrupt me and say, Jide, you got 30 minutes left or you got 5 minutes left. It's okay to do so. But I would like to, do a lot of the conversation, and then hopefully people will have their questions and that I'll be able to respond to given the time that I have. So in the conversation today, I want to cover experiences in the UK of queer people of faith. There is a video. I hope we have a link to that video. If not, you can look for it on YouTube. It's called BAME Voices on Religion. And of course, the negative experiences of LGBT people, understanding multisexualities, gender and sexualities. I will explain that. And then, of course, I will draw your attention a few times to food for thoughts. I think there's another slide about my agenda. People might think that, oh my God, this is the time for me to escape in the moment. But I trust you, it's going to be an interesting conversation, and we probably will have a dialogue as we go along. So let's move on to my next slide. So again, I will touch on cultural and religious clashes and professional capacity in equality, diversity, and inclusion. And of course, I have another short film as well on on what House of Rainbow looks like currently and the work that we're doing. And of course, if time permits me, I will go on and talk about the bonus session, but it is not a do or die situation. But you know, let's start. Let's make it start. So yeah, go on, next slide. I'm going to actually skip the introduction. So if you move one slide at a time, I will tell you to go to the next slide if necessary. Next slide, please. And yeah, that's fine. Next slide, please. I think we're good on introduction. A little bit about House of Rainbow. If you give me the next slide, I'll use the next slide to talk about House of Rainbow as well. Now, of course, as many of you probably gathered by now, you know, House of Rainbow is a faith-based organization, and we foster relationships among Black, Asian, ethnic minority, LGBT folks. And it was very important because it started with Christians, but we realized that we need to expand, you know, this to include people of all faiths and other faiths. And we've done work, you know, to actually match that as well. For example, you know, we were part of the founding members of the Global Interfaith Network that focus on sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. But I think it's so important because sometimes we have to be exclusive to be inclusive. And that is one thing that House of Rainbow is very proud of. I tried to shift, you know, the focus of House of Rainbow, but the board of directors and those who use House of Rainbow services said, no, Jude, can you just keep the focus on Black, African, Caribbean? And you can see how important that is. The fact that we also face issues of racism as well, even within the LGBT community. Next slide, please. So in terms of diversity and inclusion, just to give you a picture, House of Rainbow is Black, LGBT led. And I'm very proud to say that 87.5% of our board of directors are Black, Asian minority ethnic people. 7 nationalities are represented, and that definitely translates to more languages. 37.5% are Black queer women, 50% Black queer men, 12.5% other race, and 25% of our board members are indeed people living with HIV. 50% are under the age of 30, and 95% of Black Asian volunteers and staff. So these figures represent our beneficiaries. So when you see us deliver programs, you will see exactly this kind of demographic as well. Next slide, please. So if you haven't already done so, just like in the intro, please follow us on all platforms of social media. There are some changes with that information, but I'll update you later. Next slide. Right, okay, so the first thing is the experience of the UK of queer people of faith. But before I actually speak on this, I want us to actually watch this video. So let's go to YouTube for that video, please.
Can you still see my screen? Do you see the YouTube?
No, if you probably need to come out of PowerPoint and then take us to the YouTube link.
If you share your screen with your actual screen rather than just the PowerPoint link, that should open.
How about now?
Yeah, brilliant. Now, yeah, we can see it now.
So just before you do that, Vika, if you just want to do it on your share screen,
Sorry?
If you just want to share screen on the advanced sharing options, just make sure you've got the kind of computer audio, and we can make sure we can get a good connection on the.
Oh gosh, let me see. So you're not hearing the audio, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Share sound. Okay.
2 different lives that I couldn't bring together.
How about now? Was that better?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Not many people, you know, of Nigerian or of African descent who struggle, you know, with their sexual orientation and gender identity, only to be told by their own family, by their faith communities, that they are an abomination towards God.
I felt that being trans and being Muslim, for a time I wouldn't read the Quran because I thought it was like aggressive. I didn't like Islam. I thought it wasn't compatible with me.
Just growing up, knowing I'm a Muslim and also being taught there and then in the mosque, I was taught that being gay is wrong. You're supposed to get married to a woman, have children with a woman, and grow up them as Muslims. So knowing that, like, I'm Muslim but I'm gay, for all my life, about 15 years of my life, I knew that I actually believed that gay was a sin. So I had to battle that, try to get rid of it in my head, because of that I've got PTSD today.
I called my parents and I told them, look, I'm so happy. Finally, I know who I am, and I'm just sharing this with you. A series of exorcisms started. My family was basically shouting, demon of homosexuality, get out.
I have been ostracized, I have been demonized, I have been, there's been an attempt to exorcise me. I determined to pray to God for 40 days and 40 nights. You say to God, look, just like you gave Abraham a wife, give me a wife, I don't want to be gay. I came to understand that, it is possible for me to suppress my same-sex feelings, but it's not possible for me to get rid of my same-sex attraction.
Because I married a man, that's bad enough. Because Sean's white, that's even worse. At first, I did find it quite scary. I was always anxious to go out. I wouldn't really go out on my own. I would always go with Sean. When we do step out the house, we do have people saying the odd words and like, oh, you're haram, get lost, go burn in hell. We hear that. So always people spitting on me and whatnot. We still get it.
When people say something, Jay gets really scared. I have to stick up and I'm like, I do say stuff.
And that's where the support comes in, because when they start threatening me, Sean said, like, don't just threaten him. If you want to threaten him, threaten both of us. So that's when the support came. So Sean took a lot of backlash for me. Because of what I am, gay and Muslim, Sean got the effect a lot.
Me and Jay's always got to look over our shoulders just in case someone's behind.
They've often said that being gay is a Western sickness, is a Western lifestyle. It's not a Western lifestyle. If Black people and Africans would take care to look into our history, homosexuality existed long before colonialism or even before the missionaries arrived on the shores of Africa.
If you say that I'm not acceptable as a trans Muslim, then you're not educated enough to say that, because you don't know the facts. Because a lot of Muslims haven't actually read the Quran, but I've read it now. It doesn't say anything bad in it with regards to LGBT people, actually. Everybody's accepted within the faith. It's just people that get in the way of that. You can be trans and Muslim, or gay and Muslim, lesbian and Muslim. I feel like I'm accepted within the Islamic faith now.
The issue I present to the world is that those who argue against my sexuality as a gay man or the sexuality of the LGBT community actually need to take it up with God, because I have taken it up with God and I have reconciled. If we put gay into an acronym, G-A-Y, it simply means God adores you, God admires you, God accepts you, God accommodates you, God anoints you. If I have to hide my sexuality as a Christian leader, what message or messages am I sending out to the other young gay people? I believe that I just not only owe myself, I also owe this generation and the future generation of gay and lesbian people, of African descent, the reality of stepping out of the shadows and being who I am. And to me, that is how I want to live my life. That is, in fact, one of the legacies that I hope I can leave behind. Be yourself, be happy.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for that.
Okay, we're back to the PowerPoint, right?
Yes, please. Yes, please. So
Perfect,
we can go to the next slide. I think that we are really getting into, the spirit of queering religion. So, I mean, this slide in front of you is really from an experiment, that I have done over the years. So the question really is, what's the experiences of LGBT Christians? And many people have told us, many of these words, that you've seen on the screen. And of course, the aim of my organization, and it is some of my own personal objective as an openly gay Christian, is to actually, transform these experiences to actually something more positive. So I'm hoping that by the end of the conversation that I would have been able to help many people understand, querying religion and connecting with their own faith journeys. So I'm not going to read out the list. I mean, I'm sure you recognize these kind of patterns. If you have spoken about religion or you've spoken about being gay and a Christian, many people will feel some of these words, there is an abomination, you're misunderstood, you're marginalized, and so on and so forth. So let's move to the next slide and we'll begin to unpack. So I have done many, and I heard you talk about podcasts earlier on. I have done many podcasts. So if you want to, take a screen of that QR code, it would take you to a number of podcasts that I have done myself. And I think that, what I want to just share about this is that there's great power in visibility. There is great power in talking about who you are as a person of faith. So for me as an individual, and also for my organization, House of Rainbow, we believe that we are building LGBT and queer people of power and raising LGBT people of faith. It is so important that we have that opportunity to connect with all of who we are. The next slide, please. Right. So, I mean, I think that the first thing is understanding multisexualities. And I'm sure that many of you will be thinking, what on earth is this? And I don't think that it should be something strange. So we need to understand from sexual orientation, gender identities, even to our pronouns are important for our psychological wellness and mental health of LGBT persons. And I think too often, people have to say, look, I really need people. I want people to respect my pronouns. I want them to understand, my sexual orientation and gender identity. And to be quite honest, it's not a difficult thing to ask for. But we live in a world, or even sometimes in environments that are extremely toxic, that people are not respectful of all of who we are. That's why, I'm particularly in favor of legislation, that helps many LGBT people come to terms or actually ensure to protect their wellness and mental health. So, I mean, examples of the A to Z are actually, what we see in LGBTIQAP and so on, Two Spirits and so on. And of course, our pronouns are very important. And I'm sure many of us, will rather that people understand our pronouns, particularly for our non-binary and our transgender siblings, that, we need to understand their pronouns and use those pronouns, because it does actually impact, positively on our well-being and our mental health. Right. Next slide, please. So, I mean, I've come actually just to talk about the gender and sexuality itself. You will find this tool online, so it's nothing new. But I think what is important for me, and is I like to raise this up in many of my conversations. This is the kind of focus for sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. So, I mean, you can see on the screen right there, our sexual orientation is very, very important. And that is why you need to understand the spectrum that, sexual orientation cuts across from heterosexuality to homosexuality, even though visually you feel bisexuality is right in the middle. So that means that our sexuality cuts across the spectrum. So if you could be maybe 90% heterosexual and 10% homosexual, you could be that sexuality in itself is a spectrum, as you can see. But what is important is that our sexual orientation takes place in our heart. So that's important to know. So a gender identity is when a child is born, for example, they often use the genitals to describe, oh, you got a boy or a girl. But this is also something that we have to deconstruct, because there are people who are genderqueer. And of course, when we talk about the biological sex, for example, it's determined male and female, but we also tend to forget that there are people who are intersex. And of course, there are others in between as well. But it is also important to know that, a person's gender identity is not based on their genitalia. And I think this is a lot of the misconception that we've seen in the world today. So, I mean, more so in the Black community, in the African community, it's a binary, it's a world of binaries. You know, you're either male or female or Black or white, you know, or tall or short, you know, there is no room for maneuvering at all. Now, of course, you know, the other one that is very important is the expression. And I always say to people in Northern Nigeria, for example, there are men who actually cross-dress, and it's got nothing to do with them being queer. You understand me? Because that's a tradition. You know, they express themselves differently. But of course, you know, that tradition is being wiped out because of the high level of homophobia in a country like Nigeria. So, you know, this particular tool helps us to understand, you know, the importance of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. Let's go to the next slide. So far, I just want us to maybe just gather ourselves together, and I've put it down as a first food for thought. What can be done to change the negative experiences of LGBT Christians and other persons of faith? You can use the chat box, for example, to drop 3 bullet points that you think might be a resolution, that might be your suggestion. So what can be done? What can we do to change the negative experiences of LGBT Christians? I mean, too often, you know, from that slide that I shared with you, if you tell Christians that you're gay, even within your own faith communities, they're more likely to call you an abomination. They're more likely to say that you're going to the pit of hell. But I don't think that is justifiable. But I want us to think about the solutions. And I know that some people have often said that, what's the point of staying within a faith community if it's really, you know, going to destroy my heart and my soul? But I also want us to think about why it is that people should, you know, claim those spaces back. Okay, I'll leave you with that thought, but do post in the chat box so I know that you're connecting with me. Let's move on to the next slide. So, I mean, over the times, I have done a lot of work, and one is that I speak out a lot, you know, so I have done podcasts, I've done radio programs as well. And here is one program that I think I did many years ago. I think it's 2010. But I mean, the link is there for later, you know, not now, but so, I mean, I think that one of the things that people need to understand is the power of religious and spiritual abuse. It is actually quite destructive. And I think one of the key things is that, you know, it carries a lot of blame and shame as well. So there is a power of stigma, shame, denial, and discrimination. And these things can also be flipped back to self-shame, self-stigma, self-denial, and self-discrimination. Now, of course, you know, inaction and misaction, you know, often stands alone, but we always know that we have an opportunity to act, you know. The inaction is, what do we do for ourselves? You know, how do we resolve this situation? But I think one of the things, again, is that as a queer person, you know, you might be facing different kind of challenges. You do not go ahead and then stigmatize yourself. I'm not saying it's easy not to do. It's difficult not to stigmatize yourself. And, you know, I remember for myself, you know, when I first came out as gay, I was very much ashamed. I decided to change my names, you know, use other parts of my names that people have not used before. You know, I was deeply ashamed because I didn't have the resources, you know, to empower myself. And of course, there are times I was in denial. And that was why, you know, earlier on, I was kind of saying that, you know, I'm envious of this generation today because of the information that you have access to. When I was growing up in my teenage years, I didn't have access to as much information as I do today. And I'm also very grateful that I'm part of the voices, you know, to change, you know, those narratives that are extremely violent towards queer people. Now, of course, discrimination is another powerful abusive tool. We know that in many countries around the world, there is still legal discrimination against the LGBT community. Now, let me focus on inaction. Inaction is something that you have to do to address the situation yourself. And I know that many of us might find ourselves in religious spaces where we cannot speak up. I think that is an opportunity for you to do your own assignment, to work on yourself. And of course, do not miss the opportunity to act. It could be a small response. If you hear people having conversations that are homophobic or transphobic, you can join the conversation and challenge them. Don't miss that opportunity. If you are in a place where people are, speaking, badly or violently against marginalized communities, do not miss the opportunity to act. It could be a small one, but when you do so, please do be safe. That is very important. But if you get the opportunity, you can listen to the broadcast on the BBC program. So let's move forward on that. Of course, in relation to religious and spiritual abuse, there are also different forms of abuse, and I think that everything sometimes is connected, and many of you might be aware of what's going on in Ghana at the moment. And I have to take my hat off to the LGBT campaigners in Ghana. They are doing very well at the moment. I'm not sure they all need our solidarity. But let me come back to the point I want to make. Within religious violence and practices, there's also physical abuse. If you have heard the phrase that I will beat the homosexuality out of you, even if it's done in light of prayer, the laying on of hands for healing and deliverance is often part of a physical abuse. The emotional abuse is when the pastors are preaching hatred. And I think it's okay for us to identify them as hate speech, because it does nothing, good for the queer person sitting in that congregation. And of course, in religious settings as well, or in religious families, LGBT people are often neglected. We find that, parents might stop, contributing to the life of the young person or even paying their tuition fees. So that is abuse in itself. We have seen sexual abuse all in the name of religion as well. And in Southern Africa, we've heard of corrective rape, which is sexual abuse. And they're often done even in the disguise of religion. And of course, we've been talking a lot more recently about spiritual abuse. When someone decides, to offer prayer for you to change your sexuality, or say, I will be praying for you because I don't want you to go to hell, that is spiritual abuse. And let's be very clear, myself and my organization, House of Rainbow, have been alongside many other organizations campaigning to ban conversion therapy in the UK. And I'm very, very much focusing on the Black churches, the Black communities, and of course, where there is a lot of bad theology, that we need to stop people, from the physical, emotional neglect and sexual abuse of queer people. And the idea behind conversion therapy is often the fact that they want to change the sexual orientation and gender identity of queer people because it's considered abnormal. There is nothing abnormal about being LGBT. There's nothing abnormal about our sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. And of course, people want to use the power of healing and deliverance. And I think it's just so wrong. There's nothing to be healed. We're not wounded people, we probably just need to be left alone. Let's go to the next slide. We did put out information about our conversion therapy program, and I'm actually going to move on this one. But I think what is important is that we did have some outcomes. Let's see the next slide if I have some outcomes. Very well. So, conversion therapy is still being practiced in the UK and indeed many parts of the world, even in places where it has been outlawed. There are still underground practices of conversion therapy. But what is clear is that it has damaging and long-lasting effects on the mental health of its survivors. So just imagine, that a lot of LGBT people that go through conversion therapy, they suffer quite, they suffer the consequences. So 64% of the survey responded in our therapy research have undergone conversion therapy and say they have suffered mental health issues. So I think that for me, the campaign to ban the practice in the UK is a good campaign. And I'm very happy that in some other countries around the world it's already been banned. Let's go to the next slide. Of course, in our own research, we captured 2.6% of Black LGBT people in the UK who have undergone conversion therapy. 45.5% voluntarily considered attempting to change their own sexual orientation with a direct influence from anyone. But I think that what I will add to that is that when you live or raised in an environment that is homophobic, of course, you will consider attempting to change your sexual orientation. And that's because of the lack of information that exists. 60.6% has been advised to consider attempting to change their sexual orientation. So you can imagine, the number is getting higher in terms of, people telling you, you need to change your sexual orientation, you need to be normal. A third of those surveyed has been forced to go through attempts to change their sexual orientation. And of course, in the quantitative data, 52% of respondents that has undergone conversion therapy has been advised by religious friends. So imagine that 36% by religious leaders and 21% by religious counselors. And that is why I think that it's important to work with the government in order to bring a legal ban on conversion therapy. Let's go on to the next slide. I mean, over the years, we have actually provided free therapy for LGBT people of African and Caribbean descent. And we continue to get, requests in about 150 to 200% in demand. So we continue to do that work where we have the funding to do so. Let's move on. So when we come to examine the drivers of conversion therapy and how they can be addressed, religious and cultural beliefs is a key part of that. There are many of these and removed from colonialism for Black and ethnic minority. So the fact that people are outside of their country of origin doesn't mean that the colonialism has ended. There are still Black communities outside of their own country that have these religious and cultural beliefs, even if they are in the safety of countries like the UK. Now, of course, the legacy of homophobic laws and policies in the UK have actually also impacted on the religious conditioning and the historical roles of church that has affected our secular and moral codes. And I say that because, there are times that you hear people say that, I am spiritual and not religious. And of course, some part of my work, which I will share in a moment, is about, querying the Bible, doing a lot more to claim back the scriptures itself. And I've often said that there is no way in the Bible that actually condemns homosexuality. I'm sure many of you are probably screaming at me. I said, Judy, are you sure you've read your Bible? I mean, the reality is that there are bad theological interpretations. I mean, we can also begin to unpack the fact that, the Bible was also used to condition and approve slavery, approve the demonizing of women, subjugation of women. So we can also challenge the Bible today on how it is used, do you understand me, to abuse and subjugate the queer community. Now, of course, conversion therapy also goes to the idea of heteronormative conditioning. So a homosexual person that is subjected to conversion therapy, the idea is to make them heterosexual. And that is just completely wrong. Do you understand me? So you cannot shift. I mean, I cannot convert a cat to a dog. Well, I mean, that's actually a bad example, but anyway, I'm just trying to use the image of my beautiful florid friends. So, the species are different. The sexual orientation is different. So you cannot convert one to the other. So I think that it's better understanding that we have communities that understand the human sexuality and actually be able to protect those ones. And I'm really glad that the conversation is taking place in the UK Parliament and also now in the Scottish Parliament. My next slide, please. So identifying those at risk and those that are vulnerable to impose or self-referred conversion therapies. You saw the statistics moments ago. Now, so developing appropriate measures and conditions for people to come forward when they are undergoing or at risk of undergoing conversion therapy. In the Black community, for example, it's something that we're shy of speaking out. In 2017, you know, I did a conference with the Crown Prosecution Service and the Metropolitan Police, you know, basically addressing the reasons why LGBT people of color will not or are not reporting hate crime. And it's because of the risk that we face within our own community. Can you imagine if I was to report my homophobic 85-year-old father to the police, who is very homophobic? My father is homophobic. My father would certainly go to jail if he was convicted. But the consequences will be on, and the repercussion will be my relationship with Nigeria and the Black community. They will say, oh, Jide, the homosexual Jide has sent his father to jail. I mean, the repercussion is outweighs, you know, the fact that I need to report that. And that's sometimes the risk, you know, that we even undergo when we are subjected to conversion therapy. I'll go to my next slide. So for me, and maybe for many of us, it's so important to the recognition of the potential limitations of the bill that will be created. We need laws to protect. You know, we need to know that, you know, a bill to ban conversion therapy is not universal and cannot be universal, and we need to understand how it isn't universal. So that means that we need to find a way to protect those that are marginalized. We can't just have a blanket bill. And I think that some of the rationale is that people want to be excluded, you know, from the bill. They want exclusion clauses. And the religious communities are saying, well, you can ban conversion therapy, but you cannot ban it from a religious practice. But it's almost impossible to please the religious organizations that want to continue this practice in the name of supposed religion. And of course, Christianity is actually one of the religions that wants to continue these awful practices. But I think that it's important that we continue to find a way to challenge the inhumane treatment that LGBT people are facing in the name of religion. Let's go to my next slide. So our roles in protecting those at risk of being subjected to conversion therapies, we need to improve on and funding the mental health and well-being services offered to LGBT people, and the appropriate considering the access limitation that exists for the multiplicity that exists within the LGBT community. So within the Black community, I've always talked about that services need to be culturally appropriate and, you know, and traditionally sensitive. So I think that, you know, there are times where, you know, we don't have those services. We don't have access to those services. And of course, you know, people need to understand our stories. They need to hear our stories as well. There is a lot more that can be shared. And you know, the stories of conversion therapies also shows that, you know, we can provide information through the pain and the anxieties that people have had to face. So for me, it's really important that we start to talk about these things. My next slide. So, I mean, I have spoken about conversion therapy. I've spoken about the fact that, you know, people face stigma, shame, and denial. And of course, you know, even within conversion therapy, when you are being referred either by a family member or religious leader or a friend to conversion therapy, too often is because it's either we become so ashamed of who we are, and no one should make you feel ashamed of who you are. So I want to leave you with this thought as well. Stigma, shame, denial, and discrimination plays a huge part in how LGBT folks and society adjust to inclusion. These are some of the barriers to reconciliation of faith, religion, and sexuality. So if people feel stigmatized, if they feel ashamed, and if they're in denial and discriminatory, then of course, it will create a lot of barriers to reconciling their faith, religion. I really want every LGBT person to be like me. I'm not saying I had it easier, but right now I am so happy I'm so connected with who I am and my faith. I'm not saying that I don't have those dark days where I feel, unhappy. But I think at the overall, I am happy being gay. I am happy being Black. I'm happy being a Christian, and I'm happy, that I've been living with HIV myself for about 19 years. So, but I want people not to feel stigmatized, shamed, in denial, or discriminatory against themselves. So I leave you with that food for thought. And of course, if you have comments, please continue to post them in the chat. Right. And I probably need someone to remind me how much time I've got left and how am I doing, because I don't have to cover all the slides if we're doing fine.
So we have about, you can probably give yourself, because we started at probably about 10 minutes, 10, maybe 15. Bearing in mind, I'm sure there'll be questions and queries. So as long as you want to engage with that, it's kind of the answer there.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, I'll go through the next one probably fairly quickly because I think that people are really connecting. So, I mean, we cannot do the work of queering religion without challenging some of the exploitations that LGBT people face. So, I mean, actually, quite recently, in the last 2-3 years, we started to explore the realities of sexual exploitation of LGBT individuals in the UK. And, let's go to my next slide as well. So we started to have that conversation even within the context of modern slavery. And we found out that a lot of queer people, especially people who have fled their own countries and find themselves either in the UK or other parts of Europe, have actually been trafficked. Okay, so let me unpack it a little bit. So cultural and religious clash for queer people of faith. There is always that issue around teenage awareness of sexuality. I mean, a lot of LGBT people are often fully aware of their own sexuality when they come into their teenage years. Of course, many have been forced into heterosexual marriage. There has been the frustration of reconciling faith, religion, and sexuality, as you've heard me say all along. And there's always a question of abomination. What the Bible says is a huge one as well. Now, relationship with family and countries of heritage. And, even myself, I mean, I've had a difficult relationship with my own family and of course, connected to Nigeria as my country of heritage. Now, of course, the other thing that is very important is finding an inclusive church. Let's go to my next slide. Right, so I think that, we can also begin to look at the professional capacities in equality, diversity, and inclusion. Some people of color are gay, get over it. I think there is actually a t-shirt that's had that message on it. Treat everyone as equal. Equality and diversity training is very important, and make no assumption about cultures, race, or ethnicity. Always ask if in doubt. There is you can ask many questions. You might not get all the answers you want. But, if you're not a Black person or a person of color, always ask, start with people that are close to you. Ask, because you want genuinely to know the answers. And of course, don't apologize before asking. People always say, I'm sorry to ask you this question, I'm not racist, but I'm sorry to ask. I mean, come on, don't even apologize, just ask. As long as you're not being violent or fictitious, so just ask. And of course, there's an amazing policy that I love. Nothing about us without us. If you're going to do anything for LGBT persons of color or LGBT people, make sure that you ask people within those communities, if this is something that you can be a part of or they can be a part of as well. Now, we need to pay attention to differences and celebrate diversity. Some of the things I always think when I think about Pride is that I know that in Europe, in Western Europe in particular, Pride is like a big party. But let's not forget to protest as well, because there are places around the world where we still need to protest and be able to draw attention to the differences that we face. My next slide, please. So now let me actually address the factors of exploitation, because in the LGBT community and within faith communities, we tend to forget that, you know, people are still being exploited. The abuse and stigma is a huge one, and I've already talked a lot about physical, emotional neglect and sexual abuses on the grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity. But also, there are people seeking asylum on the grounds of their sexual orientation and gender identity. And that is actually a huge part of the work that we do at House of Rainbow, and of course, within our own community. So you might be sitting next to someone who is seeking asylum or even considering it. Now, of course, that also impacts on the cost of coming out for many LGBT people. But a lot of LGBT people in Western Europe will often, you know, come out at the detriment of, you know, the opportunity to be able to return back to their own country of origin for whatever reason at all. Now, of course, silencing by exploitation is also a huge one. And human trafficking, labor, and sexual exploitation is happening on the grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity as well. We have seen some cases of sexual exploitation of people because they're LGBT, because they're gay and lesbian, bisexual, and so on. So, and, you know, we're beginning to see the inhumane treatment in these areas as well. So let's move on. Now, other factors are forced on or arranged marriages. And you must have heard of inheritance as well. So a lot of LGBT people cannot come out, they cannot be themselves because of the power that is upon them around family inheritance. And I've already just spoken briefly about conversion therapy and religious oppression. Particularly lesbian, bisexual, queer women are caught in misogyny and patriarchy world. So again, it's really just abuses that is centered around toxic masculinity. Queer people in hostile regions and religious environments. So you kind of imagine, you know, our LGBT siblings in the Middle East, for example, or in Northern Africa, where religious environments are very hostile. And we have seen, you know, societal attitude, jungle justice and violence, you know, alongside colonial laws and prohibition laws. And, you know, a few examples are Uganda, Kenya, Nigeria. You know, jungle justice, if you don't know, is where they can actually kill people in broad daylight and no one, you know, pay attention to it. No justice will be brought for, you know, against those who have carried out those crimes simply because someone is gay. And I think that other factors also includes, you know, decriminalization and protective laws. And as long as there are laws around the world that prosecute and persecute the LGBT community, we're going to be seeing a lot of exploitation of LGBT people into human trafficking. Yeah, next slide, please. So let's do this food for thought. And I think this is probably a good place for me to pause and see what questions, what comments are coming through. So for everything that I've said so far, you know, let's think about this thought here. We can be better at understanding the realities of sexual exploitation in light of race, culture, and religion. We must listen more and create safe spaces for queer people of faith. You know, ideally, this is what I have been doing over the years and what House of Rainbow has been doing, is creating safe spaces. And I've been very fortunate, to be quite honest. You know, I've had opportunities to create spaces, you know, in person and virtually, you know, for queer people to connect. And I'm hoping for the best. So what will you do differently? You know, are you able to create safe spaces? Even be able to create opportunity to have conversation with your friend or someone that you know might be struggling with their sexuality. So think about what you would do differently. Thank you. I will take a break here and we can open for questions and see how far we go.
Thank you very much, Reverend. That was fascinating. There's absolutely loads there. It's kind of brilliant to hear the stuff that you're doing and you're kind of engaging with. What I will do is we will kind of operate on a kind of hands up system if people have questions. For those who aren't sure, at the bottom of your screen there should be a little reactions thing, and you can raise your hand. We will stop recording